So after finishing off 2023 strong, we have now arrived at our first review of 2024. And it appears that the old adage is still true. January is where mediocre horror movies go to die. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
Nightswim follows a former baseball player who moves into a new house with his wife and 2 kids. However, a dark secret from the home's past soon unleashes a malevolent force that drags the family into the depths of this inescapable terror. If that synopsis sounds generic as to you, that's because that's exactly what this movie is.
Oh, there's a big surprise!
Close your eyes for a second like you were playing Marco Polo, and think about every single supernatural horror movie or demon possession movie you've ever seen. Now, if you take all of the familiar elements that we've seen in all of those movies a million times before, and add a swimming pool, that's Nightswim. When I first saw the trailer for this movie, I remember thinking to myself, that could be fun. I wasn't exactly sure how they would make a whole movie out of that concept, but as someone who's been in a pool at night before, to me that is a setting that is ripe for some kind of horror scene.
That makes sense.
Because sometimes when you're swimming in a pool at night, even when you know that there's nothing in there with you, I'd be willing to bet that at least a good portion of you have thought about what if there was. It is a scary concept when you think about it, and it does have a lot of potential. The problem is that a good concept doesn't always translate into a good movie. I think I heard somewhere that this started as a short film, and they expanded it into a feature-length film. And after watching it, you can definitely tell. There's just not enough material here to justify a longer runtime.
Then why the didn't you say so?
So what we have here is filmmakers stretching everything out as much as possible to its limits and beyond. And they are doing it in the most predictable and generic way possible. Some things are better left as a short, or a segment in an anthology series. And it feels like Nightswim would have been better suited for that. Most of Nightswim feels like they're just kind of making up as they go, and throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
The setup for this movie is pretty typical. We have a struggling family moving into a new home that they believe will be a new beginning for them. But ultimately, of course, things end up getting much worse before they get better. This movie is desperately trying to get you to care about these characters, and believe me, I wanted to. They actually almost succeed with that with the dad character. But ultimately, you just don't give a because there is a point in this movie where it goes from, okay, they're playing it safe, and this is fairly mediocre, and then it quickly switches to what the is going on and why am I watching this? And the moment I'm talking about is when this film tries to give you an explanation for why all of this is happening. And by the end of this out of left field exposition dump, I basically gave up hope that this movie was going to do anything to change my mind about it.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Not that anyone really cares, I'm sure, but I'm not going to spoil exactly what is going on in the movie. But I will say this, if you thought that M. Night Shyamalan having the trees kill people was bad, then wait until you see Nightswim. It is quite possibly one of the dumbest explanations that I've ever seen for a supernatural event in a movie ever. As for the horror elements, like most bad horror movies, it's more about the setup than it is the payoff. Like the scene in the trailer with the 2 people playing Marco Polo. That scene has potential, but that scene, like most of the horror scenes in this movie, comes to a conclusion with lazy jump scares that leave zero impression on you.
Not impressed.
This movie is so generic that it has a scene where one of the characters is piecing everything together, and they do a little half-assed investigation, and now they discover that they have to talk to a former resident of the house. Stop me if you've heard this before. The finale of this movie plays out more like a spoof of Amityville Horror than anything. Call it Amityville Water, call it whatever you want, but it's pretty much the same premise, mixed in with these unintentionally hilarious moments. And I think these moments are supposed to be taken seriously, but the way that they're executed, it's almost impossible to do so. Not to mention that by the end of the film, I'm pretty much just sitting in my chair in the theater, predicting every single thing that is going to happen correctly.
Here I come. Oh, here I come. Oh.
I'd probably say the most interesting thing about this movie is the father character dealing with this degenerative disease, and how being in this supernatural pool, which sounds ridiculous when you think about it, but how the water impacts that disease. But just like everything else in this movie, it's just another thing that feels like it doesn't go anywhere of consequence. The payoff is supposed to be symbolic and emotional, but the film's writing is nowhere near good enough to pull it off. The only other thing that I might be able to pull out of this movie that could be considered a positive was that it does have some interesting camera work at times. But it's all dragged down, pun intended, by this uninspiring schlock of a movie. Bottom line, I think James Wan should stop attaching his name to movies like this, even if it's just as a producer and he really had nothing to do with it creatively. But from a horror perspective, he does have a solid reputation, and a movie like this could ruin that reputation and give people the wrong idea of what he's actually about.
That ain't you! You're better than that!
Nightswim is about as forgettable can get. I spent the first half of this film waiting for something satisfying to happen, and I spent the second half of this film waiting for it to be over. Normally, I'd say form your own opinion, because that's always the best route to take, but if I'm being honest, I don't really think there's any use in any of you wasting your time watching this movie that really has no idea what it wants to be. Other than, of course, a rehash of things that have been done much better in other movies. After such an uplifting end to 2023, I hate to start off 2024 in this way, but unfortunately I'm going to give Nightswim the Disgusted Ian Malcolm.
That is one big pile of
Alright, let's see how this Nightswim review is performing. Wait, what? I pissed off a Nightswim fan base that I didn't even know existed. Well, I guess if a movie like Megan has a fan base, so can Nightswim.
Y'all be cool. Right on.